I've often thought of the loaves and fishes story as a standalone story. It's the Gospel of Mark's own fireworks display, and I'd ooh and ah at the miracle and then try to figure out what it meant. Is it about giving our gifts, no matter how small, that they may be multiplied through God's work? Is it about trusting God's abundance in the midst of scarcity? Is it about the meaning of the sacrament of communion? Jesus is breaking bread, giving thanks, just like we do as we gather around the table. But verse 30, the first verse we read today, is an important verse, and I think I noticed it for the first time this week. It keeps the story from standing alone. And it says, the apostles gathered around Jesus and told him all they had done and taught. Well, do tell. What is it the disciples are doing and teaching? Sounds interesting, juicy perhaps. Maybe we'll get a little gossip here, something. The story of the loaves and fishes is connected to the beginning of chapter 6, when the apostles are sent out. Now in chapter 3, Jesus has the disciples around him, and in Mark there's more than 12 disciples. There's a crowd of disciples, and then Jesus picks from the crowd 12 to give the work of apostle, which means sent out. They have special work. And then in chapter 6, they are actually sent out to do this work. Jesus sends them 2 by 2, tells them to take nothing for their journey except a staff, no money, no food, don't bring an extra jacket, nothing. Now, any introvert will tell you that if you don't bring anything on a journey, if you go so unprepared, you'll be forced to talk to people. Very scary thing. And now, if you're an apostle being sent out, this is an opportunity to build relationship with others, which then gives you a chance to share what God is doing in the world. So Jesus' call here does seem to have a particular method to it and reason for it. It's a good strategy. But then Jesus also gives the apostles authority over unclean spirits. The story tells us the apostles go out and proclaim that all should repent, and then they cast out many demons. And they anoint with oil many who are sick, and they cure them. This might be the only time the apostles do anything right in the entire Gospel of Mark. It's a big deal. Not just because they finally get it right, but they're performing wonders and miracles, and Jesus is nowhere around. Jesus sent them out on their own. They're performing wonders and miracles. They're allowing God's power to flow through them to heal a wounded people in a wounded world, just like Jesus did. And then in verse 30, they come back to Jesus like a golden retriever with a stick in their mouth, saying, "Look what we did, oh, look what we did." And they say to Jesus, "We did it. We were teaching with power. People listened to us for like 5 whole minutes. And then afterwards, we were healing people and casting out demons. We were awesome." I mean, God was awesome. Sorry about that. But it was so cool. And Jesus is pleased. Possibly the only time he's pleased with the apostles in the entire Gospel of Mark. But he's pleased with them. And he says, "Come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while. You've worked hard. You need some time off. We'll pray, we'll kick back and relax, drain a few wine skins. It's Sabbath time, fellas," he says. And they get into a boat and head off for their retreat. But the crowd sees them and recognizes, oh, that's the disciples. They were doing the wonders. And Jesus, who's doing let's go get him. And they go around the lake and they get to the dock where the boat is going to land. And the crowd is gathered by the time the ship comes to shore. And Jesus steps off, sees this crowd, has compassion on them. They're sheep without a shepherd, and gets right to work, starts teaching them. And teaches, until it's supper time. And the disciples start worrying about food. We got to send these people home. Got to send them to the villages. They don't have any food. What are we going to do? And Jesus looks at them and says, "You give them something to eat. You just told me how you were casting out demons, healing, teaching with power. You just told me how God worked through you to perform miracles and wonders, so do it again. You give them something to eat." Now that was a long time ago when the apostles were out on their own. They don't know what he's talking about at all. They say, "What? We don't have any cash on hand. Do you know how much it costs to get a party sub at Subway these days? It's a lot of money." Jesus sighs, and starts to do the miracle work on his own. I have a couple of questions for this story. The first is, why can't the apostles perform the miracle now? Maybe they were only given power over unclean spirits and they hadn't yet studied food multiplication. But it sure seems like they've developed their miracle skills. They've got miracle chops, so why don't they just bang, make it happen? Jesus thinks they can do it. You guys want to take this one, he says. So proud of you for what you did back there. You can do it. I'll watch and be pleased. But they don't. They don't. Did they forget? How? Is it stage fright? You play the piano piece perfectly at home, but then you go in for your teacher. I'm sure this hasn't ever happened to you, Marilyn. And you sit down the keyboard and your fingers feel like they're cans of pineapple and going across the key. You make all sorts of mistakes. We easily identify with the apostles in the loaves and fishes story. We'd feel helpless too if Jesus said, give the crowd something to eat. But this brings up another interesting question. So if we are like the apostles in the loaves and fishes story, have we also been like the apostles as they were sent out in mission? In other words, has God also done something powerful through us, and we've also forgotten and don't think it's possible that God could truly work through us again or be active in our lives again? What I'm trying to get at is that the loaves and fishes story may be about a faith crisis as much as it's about the miracle of abundance. The apostles don't believe they can perform this miracle, which means they aren't ready to place their trust in God again. They aren't able. They trusted God one time. It was at the beginning of the chapter, way back at the beginning of chapter 6. That was nice. That was fun, but it's over. Time to get back to real life now. Certainly that sort of trust and result can't be sustained in any sort of way. This can't be a way of life beyond one event, can it? Karen Smith Sellers, a former professor of mine who is now the conference minister for the Minnesota conference of the UCC, said recently that the crisis in the United Church of Christ is not a financial one, it's a spiritual one. And I think she's right. So, in other words, we think our problems have to do with money. We kind of contract a feeling like our problems have to do with money. We need more money for the building, for the budget, for this, for that. We need more people so we can have more money for the building, for the budget, for this, for that. But we don't. We don't need more money. We need more faith. We need to recommit ourselves to the pilgrimage, to pursuing God's presence in our lives with the same sort of tenacity that we give to our work, to our stock portfolios, or in managing our busy calendars. We need to open ourselves again to God's leading, trusting that God is with us and that God will lead us from the wilderness to where we need to be. I'm talking broadly here, not just about the church, but beyond to our own lives. But notice I said we need to open ourselves again. I think our story is like the story of the apostles. There are times in our lives where we are powerfully aware of God's presence moving in us and through us. Now, we might not be willing to say that we perform any miracles, but maybe we discovered that God was really calling us to help and serve in one way or another. So we started serving somewhere, free clinic. We went on a mission trip. We did something. We found what we could do, and we noticed that we really made a difference in somebody's life. Or maybe we started paying attention to the pain that friends or family were carrying, and we truly communicated. We listened. We really listened without the other words going on in our heads. And we had the courage to say things that needed to be said that we often don't say to one another. And we sensed a new direction, something happening. Or maybe we were going through a time of struggle ourselves, and we prayed for a door to open, for something. Or we knew others were praying for us, so we were earnestly praying for somebody else, and something good happened. The door opened, comfort came, there was a step toward wholeness. There are times in our lives when we say with the apostles, look what we did in our lives of faith. Jesus said to serve, and we served. We made a difference. We prayed, and it had an impact. We saw it. We received a gift that just seems like more than a coincidence, and we recognized that it was God's work. God seems to be leading, and I seem to be following. This is so cool. My life of faith, it's so cool. God, you're so cool. Sorry about that, but this is great. And then a few weeks pass, or a day passes, or a minute passes, and we forget. We forget that we noticed that God was moving in and through our life. We forget that our faith led us to help someone. We forget that meditation and intercessory prayer had an impact. We forget that we walked through the open door that seemed like it was in the exact right place at the exact right time.